the chosen. Be brave, Professor. Be brave like my mother.
How do you feel?
Excellent. Really excellent.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Chapter 14, Felix, Felicis, which always gets me. I want to say Felicis every single time.
Me too.
But it's spelled Felicis. Felicis. Whatever. Julie is with us.
Hi, everybody.
And before we get into this chapter, we got a couple of shout-outs. We had a poll recently, which is basically, is using the prince's annotations in Harry's potions book, is using that info cheating or not cheating?
Not cheating.
Julie's on the not cheating side. I only pose the question because you're using someone else's work, essentially, to get a better grade. But, I get it. Robin commented on that chapter by saying, Harry is passing off as a potions innovator. I understand using tips, but when he adds extra ingredients and lies about why, that's disingenuous. The Big Bambino, on the same chapter, says, I don't think the prince's book is cheating because it seems like they're already following a given set of directions or instructions for the potion. The prince just gives better instructions.
I would agree with that. I think that it's giving tips. Like, if you grew up in a magical household and your mom said every time you use beetle legs, also add mealworms. Like, if you used that in your potions class, that's not cheating. That's something that you've always been taught. So, like, what's the difference between that and it being written in a book? Now, I do agree that Harry's being disingenuous with, like, his reasonings as to why he's changing it. But also, like, what are you going to do? Say, like, hey, I have this book that has a bunch of extra things written in it. I don't know. I don't think it's cheating. It's just
Using the resources that you have available to you?
Well, and it's not like Harry, like, stole the answers to a test or, like, it's not like he took this is what you're going to be asked on your OWLs, so study this. Like, it's literally just someone's used book that they wrote notes in. Like, if Ron was using Percy's old textbook and Percy wrote notes in it, would you consider that cheating?
It's fair.
Are we only considering it cheating because we don't know who it's from and it's, like, even, like, more helpful? Like, I don't know. I don't take issue with him getting an annotated text and once he realizes that, like, they're not a joke, that they're actually helpful, him using it.
Yeah.
Because he could also, I mean, Harry doesn't learn anything, so let's not give him too much credit, but, like, that could also help him learn more.
We're 3 minutes in and we got a Harry knock right out the gate.
Might be a new record for me. But it could also help him learn and understand potions more. Like, if it says to add something extra at this time, like, I'm not saying that Harry's necessarily the person that's going to go, well, why would I add that? But, I mean, it could also help him get a better understanding of potions.
Maybe. The poll on this, that's up on Spotify on the episode, so if you haven't voted in that poll yet, please do. It's 50-50 right now. Wow. People are pretty split. Like, our comments are kind of split on if it's cheating or not. So
usually it's just everyone disagreeing with me, so.
It's not always true, but mostly true.
Yeah.
No. So in this chapter, we get a little bit of a trio catch-up during herbology. Harry kind of fills them in on everything going on. We get some Quidditch updates. We also get a Quidditch game, Gryffindor versus Slytherin, kind of a big deal. And then a little bit of a post-match event. So we will start out with the trio getting a little catch-up in herbology. And Harry spills about the lesson. And Julie, I know in the last chapter you particularly ranted on why doesn't Dumbledore just involve Ron and Hermione in the lessons?
Well, and that's what I don't get, is, like, Dumbledore has already given the go-ahead for Harry to tell Ron and Hermione these things, and when you know that they're getting the information anyway, doesn't it make more sense for them to get it firsthand? Because if they're going to have the information no matter what, you could, there's still the same level of security risk, except now they could have faulty information. They could have missed that, a book was open to a certain page or what. I don't know. They could have missed a certain detail. And the worst part of it is, what originally made me think of all of this is they say at one point, for fear of being heard, Harry couldn't tell them right away. Mm-hmm. So, you have this privileged information that you don't want everyone to know about, and you're saying, hey, in a school that's lined with portraits that can overhear you, and ghosts that just show up, and everything that moves and listens,
shouting things throughout the hallways.
Everything that can listen and hear you and parrot it back, and you're just all right, guys, where exactly do you go in Hogwarts where no one will hear you?
Yeah. So here's my thing. I think Dumbledore probably assumes, and I think assumes correctly, that if he allowed Hermione and Ron in on these lessons in person, they might distract Harry more than help Harry. And to Harry's credit, he's asked poignant, appropriate, targeted questions that even Albus is like, oh, you caught that. Nice. Okay, yeah. Cool. So I think this is Albus's preferred way to be let Harry focus on it. And then if Ron and Hermione don't get every little detail, okay, at least Harry's clued in.
Okay, but again, Dumbledore, you've seen that every time that Harry's accomplished something, it's been with help.
You should have Hermione at least sit on the side just taking notes the entire time of the conversation that's happening. Maybe not seeing the memory per se, but just on the side taking notes. Anyway. Speaking of Hermione, her piece of information is she tells Harry of the latest Slug Club party, which featured Gwynog Jones.
What a name.
The Holyhead Harpies captain. And she also tells Harry, look, Slughorn has specifically checked with me to where your free spots are on your schedule. You're not getting out of this next Christmas party. You're going to the Christmas party. And Harry's like, great, awesome, good times. Meanwhile, during all of this happening, they're in herbology. There is this plant. Why does this plant exist?
I don't know.
It's a snargaluff plant.
That's a great name, by the way.
It is a great name. It's a stump that has vines with thorns on them that if you try to go near it, the vines sprout out of it and try to attack you. This exists. It's creative, I'll give her that.
Yeah.
But why should it exist?
I feel like this is one of those that J.K. Rowling is writing this, and she's like, all right, magical plants. See, and she happened to be watching some Nat Geo documentary about man-eating squids or something, and she's like, okay, but what if that was a plant?
I feel like people who are really into Arbor Day must love this plant. See, this is what's going to happen if you chop down trees. This stump-like thing will attack you. It
sounds like a version of the Lorax.
Yeah. Just weird plant. Cool plant, but weird plant. So anyway.
That they have to wear mouth guards, eye protection. They're all scraped up.
Yeah, this is a clear step up. This is a post-OWL class.
I love seeing the difference between pre-OWLs and post-OWLs, because pre they're guys, it's magic, look at the pretty flowers. Post they're this thing will probably kill you, so please wear protective gear.
Well, we're also if Sprout was Hagrid, this plant would be first lesson of first year.
Fair enough.
So Ron is hearing all the stuff about the Slug Club party and gets a little jealous and ends up saying that Hermione should just hook up with McLagan and be King and Queen Slug. Which is, I'll give him the King and Queen Slug thing is a good line.
Yeah.
But it's still unnecessary. The whole comment is unnecessary. I love Harry here. Hermione, who for some reason had turned bright scarlet.
God, Harry is so dense. Not sometimes, a lot of the time. Especially when it comes to females.
Especially when it comes to females. He's... And again, hey, look, I remember when I was 15, 16... I missed some signs myself. I'm not gonna front, but it's not great. So Hermione says that they were allowed to bring guests, and she was thinking about bringing Ron, but if he wants her to go with McLagan, then whatever. And Ron gets a little bit more sheepish, a little bit more reserved, quiets down a little bit. They seem to be getting along after that little dust up. And then Harry, aside to himself, is like, if Ron and Hermione end up getting together, this might change things. Might change the dynamic of the friendship, might change his individual friendships with each person, which, as much as he missed the boat on maybe what Hermione's reaction initially was, he does, it clicks.
Yeah, it clicks eventually.
And it clicks in a fairly deep way because, I don't know about you, Julie, but I've been in situations where I've dated a friend of a friend, and I'm wondering how that might change the dynamics of everything should something go wrong. If something goes wrong, that could potentially be a problem.
Yeah.
For not only the relationship, but other surrounding relationships. So it's, I think it's actually a really wise thought that he has here of like, hey, wait a second.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like, it makes sense that he would think that way. It's just kind of funny to like watch him figure it out. And I feel like this chapter in particular, a lot of Harry's internal thoughts are the like, oh, okay, you are a 16-year-old boy. Okay.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%. I do actually think, for all of JK's faults, which there are many, she does amazingly capture what it is to be a teenager fairly well in these books.
Yeah.
Of, like, you get it, but you also don't get it.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? She does capture that quite well. However, Harry also thinks, and this line is interesting, he thinks about the Slug Club party at Christmas, and he's like, what might happen under the influence of butterbeer in a dimly lit room? That's a quote. I didn't, like, fluff that at all. That's the thing.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay.
Have we ever figured out, is butterbeer just essentially, like, pop? Or does it contain alcohol? I mean, they drink it fairly young, but this is also the UK.
Correct. I think butterbeer is slightly alcoholic, but like the lowest alcohol content that you probably get. Because it's always compared to fire whiskey, right? Like, the kids aren't allowed to have the fire whiskey just yet, but is like butterbeer literally the Wizarding World's version of beer? And then there's like fire whiskey, which is like a liquor, and then there's a mead in between?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or the mead could be a higher alcohol content, I suppose, depending on the mead. But whatever. Anyway, we'll get into a Wizarding World alcohol breakdown some other time. Another thing happening in this chapter is Quidditch. We got a lot of Quidditch going on. Harry has to deal with replacing Katie Bell, which he's not excited to do. But he does have an immediate replacement ready to go. He thinks Dean Thomas is the next best flyer that he had at the tryouts. So he puts his whatever feelings he has towards Dean right now, because Dean is dating Ginny, and he's confused. Harry's a little confused about Ginny at the moment. And he puts that to the side, and he says, hey, Dean, I need you to step up. Can you be my chaser for the upcoming match? Great. Dean accepts very enthusiastically. But people start muttering behind Harry's back and probably straight to his face about his choices for the team, because now that's a couple of people in Harry's year that have been nominated to the team, plus his best friend's sister.
I think that's fair. I mean, I would make the same... Even if you watched the tryouts and were like, wow, those were the best choices, you're still going to go, huh.
Oh, no.
A bunch of people from his year, his best friend's sister.
Oh, yeah. No, the talking heads on ESPN would be eating this alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. He does note, though, that in the first practice, Dean was clearly the right choice, because the team seems to be pretty darn good, except for Ron. Ron is on the struggle bus here. Like, everybody's playing well, everybody's doing great, and Ron's not. And not only is Ron not playing well, he's belligerent to his teammates, I guess. He is not very kind to his teammates. And I feel like Harry is a good captain in these senses because Ginny, I think, steps up to Ron first and is like, Ron, you're being, whatever.
Yeah.
And Harry steps up to Ginny and was like, hey, I'm sorry, you're not the captain here. I'll deal with it. Ginny goes away, and he immediately turns to Ron and goes, you're my best mate. Stop it.
Yeah.
Or I will kick you off the team. Mm-hmm. Which I thought is a great way to handle it. Stop another player from dealing with the deal, and then go to the actual player causing all of the problems and deal with that. Problem is he doesn't get the result he really wants from it.
Yeah, and I feel like that's my issue that I kind of take with Harry and his captain duties is I feel like he very much is just kind of looking at it as the like, let's keep the peace to be the team instead of being like, Ron, come on, let's go. You've got this. You can, like, there's no pep talk to Ron, really. It's just kind of like...
He gives some positive... It's because Ron, when Harry threatens to kick him off the team for this bad behavior, Ron's like, I'll just resign.
Yeah.
And that's when Harry kicks in the positive reinforcement and the feedback and be like, hey, look, you're good. You're just in your head too much, which I totally... Coming from an athletic world, that happens a lot. You have talent, you're just in your head too much.
Yeah.
Do your actual job and you're fine. So I get that. He also helps his injured teammates, by the way. I think Ron cracks somebody with something. I think it's Demelza Robbins.
Yeah, it is.
And Harry goes and fixes her broken nose.
Yeah.
Which is great. He's got a lot going on. This is why we said when he originally got the Quidditch captaincy, we were like, does he know how much I don't think he realizes how much work goes into that.
Yeah.
And is that why Katie Bell was okay with him getting it? Because she's like, I don't need that. But no, I think he helps his teammates both injured and just mentally and dealing with Ron being not great. He deals with Ron not being great. He's establishing control of the team. I like how he's handling the captaincy here.
He's a captain.
Fair enough. All right.
I think he's doing everything that you expect a captain to do.
Yeah, give him some credit for that, though. He's stepping up. Stepping up to the
but
plate.
I don't think he needs a gold star for doing what's expected of him.
Fair enough. So Harry and Ron end up leaving practice eventually, and they run into an interesting scene as they're going back to the Gryffindor Tower. They spot Dean and Ginny embracing fiercely.
Embracing.
They're kissing or snogging, as you might say in this wizarding world. And some interesting things happen. Harry notes that he is struck with an immediate, passionate rage that he can't quite identify as to why, but he's feeling it.
Allow me to bang my head against a wall right now.
Ron is even more angry.
Disgusted and angry.
He's vocalizing it,
Yes.
though. Harry's all internal. Ron is, putting it out into the world.
Yeah, and I would say, not even in a, protective big brother way. Because you can see it from the one aspect of, you being, a big brother protecting his little sister. It seems more of a, my little sister should not be kissing anyone. Blech! Cooties.
Yeah.
Which I think is why Ginny turns around and lets him have it.
Yeah, this is an interesting brother-sister relationship here.
Get it, Ginny.
Ron nearly calls Ginny something. We don't get what he calls her. Calls her, and then whatever. Trails off. Ginny says Ron's best kiss was from Auntie Muriel, which is a solid line. Ron then, and I love this description, bypasses red straight to maroon, which is phenomenal. That's a great description. Ginny essentially tells him to get some of his own action. Which,
Ginny is just straight savage. She
is savage.
I love Ginny Weasley so much.
She doesn't.
But she doesn't pull punches.
No.
She just goes at him and is like, "Listen, bro, I'm gonna live my life. It is none of your business. I'm not doing anything that hurts anyone. And just because you are jealous because the only kiss that you've had has been from a family member."
But you know what? I do just want to take this time right now to take a time out and praise Harry for this one thing. He's feeling a lot of anger. Inside, he's like, go Ron! I agree with everything Ron's saying. But you know what? He doesn't vocalize any of it. That is a wise man right there. That's a wise man to keep his mouth shut.
Well, and the other thing, too, is that the argument gets so heated between them that Ron actually pulls out his wand when Ginny is telling him off.
Yeah. And Harry
Which
jumps in
also,
between the two of them, which
like,
is brave.
We've seen Ginny and her ability to do hexes.
I don't know that you're winning this duel.
Yeah. My money's on Ginny.
It was impressive for Harry to actually, like, step in the middle of that. Because I'm like, I don't know that I want to get in front of Ginny's wand or Ron's wand.
Yeah.
For different reasons. But
Well,
anyway.
and then Ginny just goes on and on about how everyone else is getting some besides Ron. Like, Ginny is just, like, going for it.
Harry and Cho, Hermione and Crumb. Like,
Hermione and Crumb? What, Dad?
Yeah. It's crazy. And Harry's having, like, this... Actually, I think it more knocks him for a loop than anything else. He's having, like, an internal crisis during this moment and after this moment of, like, why am I even this worked up about this? Mm-hmm. Like, why am I so worked up about Ginny right now? Ginny and Dean. Like, what is going on? And he's trying to reconcile it in his own body. So that's a whole thing. Meanwhile, Ron is stuck in his own head about, wait, did Hermione and Crumb really, like, were they really a thing? Were they? I know they were a thing, but were they, like, a thing? Like,
and then Ron, like, this is what I get so annoyed with Ron, is that he's just so mad that the idea of Hermione with someone else.
Yeah. He gets very worked up about just the idea of...
She may have kissed him.
But this goes even back to Goblet of Fire. Like, he was all up in his emotions about that a couple years ago.
Yeah.
When that was a whole thing to begin with. Because remember, he got all mad at Victor Crumb, like, once that actually happened.
It's a little, like, naive of Ron that he would go, like, oh yeah, 2 14-year-olds that are dating, they probably never kissed.
Well, Crumb was 18 at that moment,
well,
which presents its own problems.
Yeah.
But we'll skip past that for right now. But yeah, so it ends up being each boy ends up going to bed in silence, lost in their own thoughts.
Which Harry's thoughts were, he was thinking of the hallway in which he and Ginny were quite alone. And then he keeps talking about how he's thinking and I guess hoping that his feelings are elderly brotherly and not something else. And my personal favorite quote of this entire chapter, mainly because, like, I don't know, it weirds me out the way that it's worded, but when he's thinking about it, it says, "A monster in his chest purred."
It's a very romantic novel. Very
like,
over the top.
I just...
He does wonder about, is it worth risking his friendship with Ron over maybe even having these thoughts of him with Ginny? And this scene right here, where in the book, they go to bed in silence and they're both in each other's thoughts. In the movie, I actually really like this, even though it's not in the book, because they don't go to bed in silence. They actually have a talk. And Ron asks him, what does Dean even, like, see in Ginny? And Harry has this great quote about... Danny Radcliffe delivers it so well. He's like, well, she has nice skin. And then Ron's like, you're saying Dean's dating Ginny for her skin. Hermione has nice skin. It's an interesting scene in the movie. I liked it. I wish it was theirs because I would have used that in the intro if that was an actual thing, but it wasn't. All of this, the terrible Quidditch performances, the blow up with Ginny and seeing Ginny and Dean, has Ron in this, like, downward spiral in this chapter.
In this mood. Ron always ends up in a mood.
He is very moody.
He is very moody and
dude.
very overdramatic, and he's in a mood.
He ends up being extraordinarily rude to Hermione, pretty much angry at literally everyone, and somehow even worse at Quidditch than he already was. Mm-hmm. And Harry ends up, this is where he ends up threatening to kick Ron off the team, and Ron just, is like, you know what, forget it. I'll just call it a day. I'm terrible, and this
Also, dramatic much?
Harry somehow convinces them to at least show up for the Gryffindor-Slytherin match. And in the breakfast leading up to it, Harry very dramatically, speaking of drama, dramatically puts something in Ron's drink, which Hermione catches. And then they have a continued blow-up, and Ron reacts poorly to Hermione's... Everything's
Ron
going poorly.
is moody and dramatic.
Ron is moody, yes. The accusation is there might be... Harry's setting the tone. He's like, oh, it's a beautiful day. Aren't we lucky that the weather is so great today? This is going to be a great match. The Slytherin Chaser's not here. Oh, wait, Malfoy's not playing either. Mm-hmm. We got 2 Slytherin starters out today. Well, that's pretty lucky, don't you think, Ron? That's pretty lucky.
Yep.
Lucky, Ron.
It's lucky.
Really lucky. So Ron enters the match with a renewed sense of, I don't want to say confidence, but
His little pep in his step.
A little pep in his step, yes. And, which immediately gets diminished once they hear who's announcing this game, which is Zacharias Smith, who's not exactly pro-Harry. Or pro-Gryffindor.
Also, how do they choose the announcers? Are there tryouts? Because also, it notes that he's a player.
Yes.
He plays Quidditch. So
he played Quidditch with Cedric Diggory. Yeah.
So what exactly is he supposed to do during Hufflepuff matches? So are there 2, like, Lee Jordan was so good that he didn't need a backup, but now they're like, well, I guess we're going to need multiple people.
Well, Lee didn't play, so he could just have that job.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So So here's my 2 things. Either Zacharias Smith didn't make the Hufflepuff team this year, which is entirely possible, or he's still on the team, but during the Hufflepuff games, they do have someone rotate in, maybe?
But, like, think about how many students are at Hogwarts versus how many people... It's not like the teams really have a ton of... the Gryffindor team has no alternates.
Right. I guess, he does have, having played Quidditch, if he's not on the team this year, having played Quidditch, he has Quidditch knowledge to at least comment on the Quidditch being played.
Yeah.
So, that's a tick on the resume for him.
But when he's playing in...
So they'd have to find somebody else
like
if he's still playing.
Half of the games.
Yeah.
Who's in charge of the Quidditch program? Who's the athletic director at Hogwarts, Dan?
That's fair. That's a fair question. I would lean McGonagall.
I would lean Hooch.
Hooch should probably do it.
She teaches flying. She refs all the games. So I would assume that she's in charge of it. McGonagall just watched Lee...
She's in charge of the Quidditch program?
Yeah, and McGonagall just watched Lee Jordan because Lee Jordan was a Gryffindor.
I could see it being Hooch, and then McGonagall's just a game day presence to make sure, Hooch is actually
Well, but Lee
officiating.
Jordan was a Gryffindor.
That's true. So would it be Sprout, would there?
So my assumption would be McGonagall, because of her personality, if Lee Jordan was saying anything off color, she'd be like, stop that.
Yeah. So you're thinking Sprout is, over her shoulder?
Maybe.
We get to the actual match, and Harry becomes distracted as Gryffindor is just pummeling Slytherin.
How lucky, Dan.
They are, yeah, right?
How lucky.
Very, very lucky. They are destroying Slytherin. It's goal after goal after goal, and they say that Ron hasn't actually let in a goal.
Yeah.
He saved everything. Now, granted, he nearly loses the match because he's so distracted by conducting the Weasley is our king chants that he almost loses the sight of the snitch and gets beat, but he's able to speed up, catch it, distract the other chaser or the other seeker.
That to me was a little dirty.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I was reading that and I was like, okay, putting in our luck potion, is it shady and shifty?
It's straight up illegal, yeah.
Yes.
Hardcore illegal.
But also when you're playing and then it's you realize that you're about to be beat, so instead of just trying harder, you say, how much money did Malfoy have to pay you to stand in for him today? That's some Slytherin team moves right there.
Sure. I think Oliver
like
Wood
it.
would have said the same exact stuff.
I don't like it.
I think Wood would have done the same thing.
I don't like it.
I don't know about Angelina Johnson, but Oliver Wood definitely would have done the same thing. So essentially, when he catches a snitch, if I'm reading this chapter correctly, did Gryffindor just beat Slytherin like 250-0?
I think so,
That's
because
the
they were up
impression that I
by
get.
they were up by 100 points before the snitch.
Right, and they said that he hadn't let in a goal. So
Yeah.
is this 250-0? Because that is what's the? I know this probably isn't the record for point
Yeah.
differential, because I'm sure at some point someone's like run it up completely.
Yeah.
But that is a thorough just beat down. That's breaking rights for a while. Anyway, we end up learning that actually Harry did not put the luck potion in the drink in the morning. He still had the fully corked and waxed sealed bottle in his pocket. He just
In the
faked it.
best display ever, where Hermione is just like coming at him for it and saying like, I should report you. Why would you do that? And Harry's like, do what? I didn't do anything. Shaky, shaky. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little rude of Harry to just set up Hermione on a tee like that. Like,
Yeah.
he should have probably given her like a little heads up, like, hey, just FYI, this is all
well,
good.
but I don't think it would have worked. Hermione and Ron are kind of like on the outs right now, and I don't
Yeah.
know that if Harry went up to Hermione and was like, hey, I'm going to pretend to put this in his morning pumpkin juice, like, can you play along? Like, especially for Hermione with
I get you.
Quidditch. Like, I don't think that Hermione would be like, yeah, let me help you win a Quidditch match, Harry.
Yeah, it's just the way it turned out. Like, maybe not before, because I agree with you, it probably
Yeah.
wouldn't have worked as well. But afterwards, somehow, I know they were right down to the Quidditch pitch.
Yeah, like you could have let Ron walk ahead and then show Hermione
Right,
the seal
because
or
this
whatever.
Backfired, because Hermione's going down there and be like, oh, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done
Yeah.
this, making it seem as though she had zero confidence in Ron.
Yeah.
And it just exponentially made everything worse between them,
Yeah.
which is not what Harry was intending. It just backfired.
Yeah.
But
As
whatever.
most things that Harry does happen to do.
Sometimes, a lot of the times, most of the time.
All the hate that was missing from last week just came right into this week.
Yeah, you're coming hard for Harry on this one. But Ron, obviously, predictably, turns on Hermione for her disbelief. And Harry has this moment where he's like, I can't explain to Hermione that her offense that makes Ron so upset with her was kissing Victor Crumb years ago. Why? Why can't he explain that?
Well, no, I actually do kind of get that, though, because I feel like if I was Hermione and Harry was like, Ron's pissed that you kissed Victor Crumb 2 years ago, I'd be like, are you kidding me right now? What a dumb thing to be pissed about. Something that happened 2 years ago and now all of a sudden you're mad about it when, like, we were friends back then. It's not like we were in this weird, like, will they, won't they, like, oh, we might have feelings for each other thing. It wouldn't make it better, it'd make it worse.
Yeah. Harry and Hermione, though, I would hope that they'd have a better, solid connection of just like, can we talk to each other? Because Hermione tells him some truths sometimes.
Yeah.
And, and Harry tells Hermione almost everything, if not everything anyway.
Okay,
So,
the birds.
okay.
it wouldn't have been better for Harry to tell Hermione. I mean, think about the birds that we'll talk about momentarily.
Hermione is in an emotional state in her own right.
Yeah, and this would have made it even more emotional, I think.
Fair enough. We get to the post-match party, which Julie is referencing. Mm-hmm. And Harry has to fight through crowds of girls just to get into a space, and led by Romelda Vane. And he gets through the opening of the Gryffindor common room, and he spots Ron and Lavender embracing aggressively. That's going to be my phrase of this chapter. Aggressively embracing. Yeah, not really hiding it to anybody or anyone. They're kind of just, they're there and they're doing their thing. So Harry does try to, he's like, ooh, okay, well, this is uncomfortable for everyone. Because it is just it's uncomfortable for everybody. Yes. Fair enough. And he turns around and he sees a wisp of bushy brown hair leaving the common room. So he goes to follow, finds Hermione in a nearby classroom. And obviously Hermione is very clearly hurt by the scene of Ron and Lavender in the middle of everything. And Ron and Lavender come in as Harry and Hermione are really about to have a discussion. I think they're about to have a discussion about this. Ron and Lavender intervene, come in, Hermione leaves, but before she leaves, the charmed birds that she has, which I give Harry a nice moment for just acknowledging, like, actually really well done.
Yeah.
Like, everything aside right now, that's impressive.
Yeah.
But the birds that she has encircling them ends up getting fired at Ron. And not just fired like tennis balls. They're tennis balls that peck and claw at him.
Which also impressive. That not only did you conjure these birds out of thin air, but you can actually control them.
Yeah, don't anger Hermione, I think, is the lesson that the boys are learning here. But yeah, what do you get from this post-match party, Julie? What do you get from the...
I think that Ron and Lavender's whole thing is a big revenge thing to Hermione. Because it's, he is openly, what are we calling it? Embracing aggressively with Lavender in the common room. And who's going to have to come into the common room at some point? Hermione.
Yeah, I get that. So essentially, you weren't here for that episode. It was me and Elizabeth. Yeah. But you would agree with Elizabeth's point of view that Ron is, I don't want to say targeting Hermione here, but it's a pointed expression against Hermione.
Yeah.
So my view on that is, I don't know, especially after this chapter where Ginny goes after Ron hard about like, hey, you need to get your own action. Like, go get some experience yourself. And then come to me when that happens. He's literally been taunted in this chapter about it.
But I'm sure it's a mix of both. Like, you had your little sister saying, like, you need to get some, only your aunt has kissed you. And then you have the, girl that you've been crushing on that you're mad about because she kissed someone 2 years ago. And it's a giant, like, ha, I have somebody too. And Ron is moody and dramatic, and he's not going to just sit there and be like, oh, I do make out with someone. He's going to be like, hey, guys, look at me. Look at me.
I think, well, first of all, there's two in this scenario. It's not just Ron. Lavender is an equal and willing participant in this thing, too. So it's a two-person thing. But I think Ron is so looked over in every form and fashion. He's next to the smartest person in their year, potentially the school, probably the school. And he's the best friend of Harry Potter. And he's in a family who's got a lot of talented, older individuals who take a lot of shine.
Yeah.
And Ron finally has someone who has been giving him attention this entire book.
Yeah.
And being like, hey, I like you. Hey, hi, I like you. Hey, I really like you. Hey, waving her arms up and down like, I like you. And Ron's like, oh, I have attention. I finally have attention. I'm going to go towards the person giving me attention.
But then I think he's also going, I have attention, everyone.
Maybe. But is that as much against Hermione specifically as it is maybe against everybody? Be like, oh my god, I finally did something well. I have all of the attention.
But considering that, think about what happens right before this, though. Is Hermione alluding to the fact that Ron is also bad at Quidditch? And that he only did so great in the match because she thought that he had a little magical help.
Well, yeah, he's not exactly thrilled with Hermione at the moment. But is he thinking, like, as he's snogging Lavender, is he being like, I hope Hermione's seeing this? Or is he actually being like, oh my gosh, I'm, like, snogging Lavender Brown?
I think it's a bit of both.
Really?
Yeah.
That I don't see. I think he's caught up in the moment, but I'm sure when we get Elizabeth back on, she'll also have her 2 cents back on this. I will say that the way they treat each other, Ron and Hermione both, not great.
No.
On both fronts, I'm don't ever assume that I'm excusing Ron for some rude comments to Hermione or whatever. I'm not, because that's uncalled for both ways. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't see the vindictive makeout session. I guess I don't know, but whatever. Unless you have anything else for the non-spoilers, we'll move right on to the spoiler section. So we will be right back after this break. Before we get to our break sound, I'd like to acknowledge our friend Andy, who helps us produce our intros and our break sounds. If you want to hear more of Andy's work and like Formula One racing, check out the Outlap F1 podcast. It's your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts, and they even have a YouTube page. So check out Andy, Cody, John, James, and Deanna, and join them on the Outlap.
Where is he? Where's my 1-1?
All right, so we're back with the spoiler section of Chapter 14, and if you thought we were done talking relationships and teenagers, you're wrong. However, we are going to talk about relationships and some adults, too, because this is essentially, I guess Goblet of Fire was the beginning of the Ron Hermione stuff.
Yeah.
But obviously now we're getting into it in a very heated nature.
Yeah, and in a more, I guess, like, concrete way. It's kind of funny, though, with how much they, like, prod at each other when you know that they end up married with children at the end.
Yeah.
Like, they're mean to each other when they're...
Ron was
like,
awful. Early in this series, he was really mean and rude.
And it's like, they are so mean to each other when they're not, like, actively engaged with each other, that, like, you look at it and you're like, I'm sorry, how did you guys end up married?
Yeah.
Married?
Which also makes you wonder what their married life is actually like.
Right?
Like, granted, they ended up together, so they obviously do love each other. But at the same time, if they're taking pot shots at each other, they
but
must.
Their whole relationship, like, when they're, like, dating, is very back and forth. There's a lot of external pressure happening when they're actually together. I mean, like, Voldemort's back. They're trying to, like, deal with that. They're traveling with Horcruxes, although they've been hanging out with the Horcrux the whole time, so they should be used to it.
Also true, and you know
maybe that's why Ron's so moody all the time.
Yeah, we've had that theory about, like, wait, does Harry as a Horcrux impart negativity on others as just a general aura?
But maybe that's why Ron's always so moody, because he spends so much time with Harry.
Very possible. And I don't know, we get the moments of him being in close quarters with Hermione and Harry with the locket and how the locket influences a lot of just bad negativity and drama. And it's an interesting dynamic that they have.
Yeah, well, it also kind of makes you wonder if Ron and Hermione are a pairing because of, like, love and affection for each other, or if they're like a, you know, like, war buddies type situation.
We lived through a trauma.
They went through so much together and stood by each other, and they had those, like, feelings for each other that it's like, at that point, like, how do you even break up with someone when, like, you already had the feelings and the attraction for each other, and then you go through literal hell?
So I know the math works out as far as how these relationships play out.
I know, which is also kind of why I'm a little like, eh.
Like, I think a lot of people, I think the more natural relationship that people point to is maybe Harry Hermione, because they don't really bicker and fight as much as Ron and Hermione do.
And I do think that they're a lot more natural of a pairing, and that the only reason that wasn't Endgame is because then Ron is just an afterthought of the entire book series.
And Harry becomes, like, a part of the Weasley family more, like, concrete.
Yeah.
It works out better the way it does.
Yeah, but it's a little too, here's a bow on top of it.
Who would Ron even go after? Would you have to introduce another, like, character? Or does the Lav thing work out? Or Luna?
Actually, I feel like Luna would have been a good one.
Can you imagine? Well, it would have been a good one for the storytelling of the character. Because Ron, again, is mean to Luna a lot. So I guess you're getting the character turn anyway, of, like,
Yeah.
him being mean to a girl and then end up liking the girl.
Ugh, I don't like that.
But that same trope.
I don't know. I've always felt weird about the Ron and Hermione endgame situation. It's always felt a little, like, forced to me because Harry and Hermione always felt like a more natural pairing, and I think have always had better chemistry.
Yeah, it's an interesting path that they go down to finally getting together. I know...
Like, they have to fight a lot, right? Because how do you not bring up, like...
petty stuff from the past.
Like, how do you not go, hey, remember when you had a flock of birds attack me?
That would be hard to forget. You probably still have maybe some scars after that.
Yeah.
Like, that was probably an aggressive attack.
Daddy, why do you have that scar on your arm? Well, when we were at school together, your mom sent a flock of birds to attack me because I was making out with somebody else. Because she said I was bad at Quidditch.
Hermione could throw out some... I mean, she could throw out, like, literal magical daggers, and she could also throw out some emotionally cutting daggers, too, because she can throw out some Victor Crumb stuff in his face, and, you know, it can be tricky to navigate, which is what Harry is thinking about in this, is like, wow, there's a lot of upheaval that could happen if Ron and Hermione get together. What if I get together with Ginny? Is that going to be a problem with Ron? Before recording, and we're just talking about, like, oh, you know, the movie had a lot of relationship stuff. That was real unnecessary. They leaned into that hard. And then we're reading these chapters and we're like, no, there's legitimately a lot of relationship stuff.
I completely forgot how hard JK leans into the relationship stuff in this book. Because even when I was looking at the outline that you made for this episode, like, I'm reading it and I'm like, wow, Dan has a lot of interesting commentary on what's happening here. And then I was like reading it, I was like, oh no, these are all verbatim. Oh, this is just an entire chapter about teenage relationships.
You thought the influence of butterbeer in a dimly lit room was just me making something up.
I literally
That was actually in the book.
I read it and I was like, wow, Dan, these are supposed to be children's books in reality.
Yes, Julie, they are. But you know what words were written in said book? I'm like, okay. Which I have comments on, but we'll save those for another chapter here coming up soon, which begs a whole bunch of different questions, but we'll get there when we get there. Yeah, I like I said, I do think JK does a really good job portraying the emotions and the thought processes of teenagers and how they screw up such seemingly simple things, but it's simple things because we're adults that have lived through a lot of those mistakes that now can look back on them and I'm like, oh, that was so dumb. Like, we didn't make mistakes when we were kids.
Yeah, well, and I also feel like these chapters, while they are like fluff chapters, they also bring us back to these are teenagers. Because I know that I tend to talk about this a lot, but it's so easy to forget the age of these characters and what that age means. And chapters like this, because I know we were talking earlier about how in these later books there's so much information happening in all of these books in every single chapter, and it feels like you don't get the Death Day party chapter where you're like, what was even the point of this? I kind of get why they cut it out of the movie. Like, you get to these later books where, like, every chapter, you're like, how did you not make a movie that was 7 movies long for this book? And then you get chapters like this, and you're like, oh, look, a fluff chapter. And you're like, oh, wait, this is to ground us back down and to remember that even though they're, like, fighting this big evil, they're fighting, like, these adults, they're dealing with death and destruction, that, like, they're still teenagers and still go through teenage hormones.
It was interesting, the scenes in the movie, like, they played this chapter out pretty dead on. I mean, I think they included pretty much almost everything in this chapter in the movie, particularly with the relationship stuff, like we're talking about now. And I remember that scene, and I had always liked the scene with when Harry sits down with Hermione, and she just, like, kind of leans on him and cries. And I thought that was a good, like, friendship moment of, like, I think Harry even says it in one of these chapters of, like, Hermione's needs are more than Ron's right now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go hang with Hermione. I'm going to go spend time with her. And I think
Ron's busy getting some. He doesn't need any help.
He was just following his sisterly advice that he got, okay? No, but I think it's a good... Harry's had, at different times, been caught in the middle of this Ron-Hermione thing, and he hates it. and he has to try to be a good friend to both, which is a hard line to walk. And I think he does it fairly as successfully as he probably could.
Yeah. I'm ending on a Harry compliment.
I know. All three... I know you were particularly hard on Harry in book 5 being, like, emotionally unstable. But the real reality of it is they're 3 teenagers. All 3 of them have their moments of being completely emotionally unstable, even Hermione, who sends
Which is funny
birds
because you would
to
think that
attack.
Harry would be more unhinged in this book,
You think.
all things considered.
He's getting a lot dropped on his plate from a lot of different angles.
Yeah. But, you know what? Way to go, Harry.
I like how he's also thinking about, like, my Quidditch team is just full of landmines, because I got my best friend who's terrible at keeper, but he can be good, but he's mentally, like, down on himself, and then I've got my chasers are in a relationship, but I kind of like one of the chasers myself.
And I want to kick the one off the team that is kind of, sort of, not really my friend.
And he hasn't even started with the drama yet, because when McLagan joins the team, that's even more drama that gets added to it, so... Harry has a lot of emotional juggling to do.
Yeah, look at him.
But
Maybe he should be the Wizarding world's first therapist instead of an Auror.
do you really believe that?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think you did. As soon as it was out of your mouth, I'm like, you don't believe it.
No. Not at all.
Do you have anything else for the spoiler section?
No.
I think it was just relationship talk,
It was
really.
just relationship talk.
Nothing crazy. Obviously, Ron and Hermione end up together. They have kids. It's great. Everybody gets folded into the Weasley family one way or the other. So, because, that family wasn't large enough to begin with. You're just folding more and more people into it. But no, that's the way, it neatly works out. So everybody's happy, I suppose. Anyway, we'll wrap it up here then, and we'll call it for Chapter 14. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please support the podcast by sharing it, by liking and commenting on our Twitter and Instagram at HogwartsAPod. You can leave a review on the Spotify, participate in the polls that we have there. We love hearing those poll results, including the ones that are 50-50 like we had last chapter, which is cool, that it's kind of a split opinion. And obviously a lot of people gave us comments, which we'll get to soon, on our Ron and Hermione talks and our takes on if Ron is doing this intentionally. So we'll get to those comments and results soon. Also, if you are so inclined, you can support the podcast by leaving a financial donation by clicking the Support the Podcast link wherever you find us. We put a lot of time and effort into this, so that really does help. Other than that, thank you for listening, and we will see you back here next week for Chapter 15, The Unbreakable Vow.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at HogwartsAPod.